Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to Aquarius Rising Africa. For all you Americano early risers, I know a lot of you are probably still tucked in and it's cold there. I do know that. Welcome and happy 2026. I hope you all had a fantastic year. And again, thank you for those who have stuck with us for, gosh, 5.5 years now and on our lovely channel and just, yeah, exposing more and more inconvenient truths. And today, of course, back with me, Guy Anderson, all the way from the UK. We're going to be talking about the Cabbage Patch Kids. And yeah, guys, such a great resource for these topics. And if you guys haven't caught my first interview with him, please do. I do believe it was about a month ago. We spoke about Tartaria and touched on a lot of these subjects. And thankfully, Guy will be joining us every couple of weeks to share more knowledge and on these topics. So, yay, very happy to have him back. But before I go any further, I just want to make a few announcements for the week. So let me just pop up the schedule and let Grandma get her eyes on ya. So, of course, yesterday at 2 o'clock Central Africa time, Guy Anderson. And then, of course, tonight, Beverly Roads at 6 p.m. Central Africa time. Tomorrow, part 11 of the mini series of the Ankara field. So catch that on Solutions with Shanti. Then again tomorrow evening with Beverly and myself, Spiritual Forensics, where we shine our spiritual eyes on any dodgy topic that might be going on, especially past crimes, maybe even things that are happening at the moment. So join us for that. Very super interesting what we're finding there. Last week we actually had a look at Taylor Swift. Beverly does remote viewing. I do the energy deciphering. Anyway, cool. Then, of course, Wednesday, yay! 10 o'clock, Australia Roundtable. That's going to be so amazing. We're having with me Rachel Vaughan, Kerry Saint, Doug McIntyre, Andrew McIntyre, and hopefully, I'm not sure about Joanne Breeze, but the whole bunch of Australians getting together talking about what's happening in Australia. So join us for that. Really, really cool. That's 10 o'clock in the morning. Double Trouble with Jesse in the afternoon. So join us for that as well. Super interesting topics we're going to be addressing this week. Looking at the psych wards, the mad doctors, stuff like that. So stay tuned for that. Yay! And then Thursday, my first solo session on Solutions with Shanti in the field. I'm going to be talking about finding peace in a chaotic time. We really, in very, very crazy, chaotic times now. So, yeah, finding your discernment during these times. How do we discern what to believe and what not to believe? And if you've been following the Ankara series, you will kind of get what I'm talking about, where we literally work with transforming, remembering, bringing ourselves back into resonance. So when we bring ourselves back into resonance, then we can discern what is true and what is not true out there, right? And that's happening on Thursday. And then, of course, Thursday night on Aquarius Rising Africa, Dr. Dennis Carroll again. Happy to have Dr. Dennis back. Friday, Drop In with Shanti, both on Arrow and Solutions. And then on Solutions, Saturday, the Rehan, where we're playing old shows. We're replaying them. So it's fantastic just to catch up and kind of revisit the shows we did 4 or 5 years ago already, and speak to some of the guests there. Really just amazing, and just gather all there. And then the Patreon book club, that this week's one, Book of Daniel, last month, Book of Daniel will be going on to Solutions. And then, of course, the Sunday loop, which is also replays of the Aquarius Rising older shows. Yay! So that's our schedule for the week. Busy little bees here on Ara. And without any further ado, welcome. How are you, Mr. Guy Anderson? So good to see you again.
Thanks for having me back on. I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I really enjoyed our last show we did. I mean, it's we. I know that you're an expert, I want to say, on so many diverse topics that we often bring talk about here, and certainly have had very knowledgeable guests on our channel as well about these topics. But it's so good to talk to you. Last week we spoke about Tartaria and we touched on the Cabbage Patch Kids. And for our viewers as well, recently we did a show with Jesse Zabota. We were also talking about the Cabbage Patch Kids and the hospital, the Cabbage Patch Baby Hospital in Georgia, I think it is Atlanta. Caleb Jade actually did a show with him maybe 2, 3 years ago now already, also speaking about the Cabbage Patch Kids and how these kids are created, brings us to the turn of the century with all these incubator babies when we're looking at that whole Tartaria thing, the repopulation of the world. And last week we spoke about, not last week in our last show, so interesting, Guy. Very happy to have you fill in all as many blanks as possible. I don't know that we get them all filled in, but when we get as many filled in, we're going somewhere. Welcome back. Nice to see you again. Happy New
Thank
Year.
you. Yeah, well, we should be saying that on the 1st of April, but we're stuck with the Gregorian calendar for now. So Happy New Year to you too.
That's actually true. We should start that trend. That's
Mm.
true. This has not even felt like a new year to me. I have to say, it's just kind of like gone right in. But I like that. Why the 1st of April, Gregorian calendar? Why does that resonate with you?
Well, because that's the calendar we should be following. The start of the year
Right,
is rebirth, and that's what spring
right.
represents. And of course, you're now considered, well, ever since the calendar was changed, you're considered a fool if you don't follow the new ways, and you still want to believe that the 1st of April is the start of the new year. You're considered a fool, and that's where April Fool's Day comes from. But we should go back to 28 days, 13 months, and starting the year in spring. It makes a lot more sense. Naturally, it makes more sense. But
Of
and of course,
course
the
it
tax
does.
system still works the same way.
Wow. Of course it makes sense. And it's true what you say. When you look at the astrological wheel, and it's so important because I think over time religion has done so much damage to a lot of topics, such as the topic of astrology. And I agree, as with so many things, it has been abused for sure. But we cannot deny that there is the astrology of the heavens that is literally like a map of the heavens, right? Which God follows by the planets, so to speak. And it makes so much sense what you're saying, and that would be obviously the zodiacal creatures or symbols. And it would make a lot of sense what you're saying if you're following that calendar, that the 1st of April would be the start of the Aries season, right? And that would be the creation. But also, Aries is ruled by Mars, which is the god of war, incidentally. What do you make of that? So, what would the flip side of that then be when you're looking at that?
I don't really have an opinion on it. All I know is they're missing a star sign, um, and they're missing a month, aren't they? Sol was removed,
Yeah,
so if that was put back, there are going to be a few people out there that their star sign shifts. So that would be interesting, but it's not something. It's not something really that I investigate. I'm more into the suppression of our history, the falsification of our history, and cloning and Tartaria. Really, I don't really look into. I don't have the mental capacity, frankly, to look into too many
yeah,
other things.
exactly. It gets a lot, right? It gets
Mm,
That's why, like, when I'm researching a topic in the moment, and especially having so many diverse guests, I'll, that the information will stay with me, but then it sifts through, right? And of course,
mm.
there's the echo of it being there, but you can't contain all this information. You definitely can't. But very interesting. Okay, so if we're talking about like the Cabbage Patch Kids today, which is really what we're here to chat about, I would love to hear. Let's do a deep dive into this, guys, shall we? What do you have to
Sh-
tell us about this
Sure.
very spoken about topic and
Most,
confusing for many people?
yeah, we know that obviously they do things in such a way that they're telling us what's going on and what's happened, but in a way in which we'll dismiss it. And that's probably where the dolls come into play. Most people would just assume that when we talk about the Cabbage Patch Kids or Cabbage Patch Babies, we're talking about Xavier Roberts' doll,
Mm.
and and the clues are all there. The building itself, Babyland General Hospital in Georgia, is what we would class as a Tartarian building. It's Greco-Roman, and it's got the Masonic black and white checkered floorboard. And there's one wall when you walk through the entrance. One wall is completely covered in photographs of their most, I suppose, famous visitors, and they are all celebrities that we would consider associated with being cloned. Every single one of them. Um, and the story behind the dolls is very similar to the story of the orphans, and that is that Xavier Roberts basically created a marketing strategy that involved a story. So you got this little book, and it told you how the Cabbage Patch Babies were created, and that he discovered them through a cave, and there were these creatures flying around called bunny bees, and they sprinkled magic dust on the cabbage patches, and babies emerged, and one of them said to him, "Please find us people to adopt us. Please find us families, because if you don't, we've got to go and work in the mines." And of course, that's why we refer to children as miners, because traditionally it was children that were sent down the mines to work. So it's all there. It's all in plain sight, but very cleverly done. So we dismiss everything as fiction. But the Cabbage Patch Babies themselves, that I'm talking about, were mass-produced clones, all Caucasian, in the 1800s to repopulate, and thousands and thousands of them were mass produced, and a lot of people out there are the descendants of them.
Okay, let's go back to that because that you actually said that last in one of my previous conversations I had with you, and I'm not sure if it was said in one of our private conversations or if we spoke about it on air, but that the Cabbage Patch Kids are all Caucasian.
That's
Now,
correct.
immediately there was like ding, a myriad of red flags and church bells kind of sound all going off at the same time. That would make a lot of sense to me. But take us, if you don't mind, take us to before that, because I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the reason why they've mass produced fake babies is because there must have been some type of a depopulation that happened before that, maybe like the Great Flood or the Mud Floods, stuff like that. So maybe you can talk to us on that. And then what information, who created, who cloned these babies? Who is their DNA from? Who gave them? Are they all incubator babies or are they actually inseminated into women as like an artificial insemination? So they might have had different DNA, but still carried in a womb, in a human womb type thing. I'm very fascinated by that because that to me is where the confusion, a lot of different theories are coming in, and I'd love to hear your take on that. Who began it? How it began? Where? Details on that, please.
Okay, so the population between 1776, when New World Order began, and we entered what people refer to as Satan's little season. That's the 4th of July, 1776. That's when the parasites took over. And between 1776 and 1876, that 100-year period, 3.35 billion people were killed. So what you had left was 1.3 billion people. What they had done is removed mainly the adult population from the world, and they did this through several different methods. One was that they reduced the population through pandemics. They had various outbreaks. There were acts of genocide, but the main method was actually war. So there were a lot of civil wars. Perhaps the Napoleonic would be the biggest example. So they removed the majority of the adult population that way, mainly the men. The women were incarcerated because at the same time they introduced the Lunacy Act. And one of the stipulations within it was that if your husband was killed in battle, you were considered insane. As far as they were concerned, a woman could not raise a family without the father. The children would be taken away and became property of the state. And the women were sent to workhouses and asylums, which opened overnight. What you had left was a huge number of children, into the millions of orphans all over the world. And my mother's father was one of them. So he was in Ukraine and he was shipped to America. And they were given new names. For example, he's from Ukraine and his name is Harry Hyman. I mean, how Ukrainian does that sound? Well, obviously it was Crimea then. So about 500,000 children were shipped to America and they were distributed. So the orphan train movement got rid of, I suppose, a problem of not having enough people to perform and operate an infrastructure. So they were sent to farms and factories and so on. And they were the workforce behind the Industrial Revolution. But it still wasn't enough. So they had to repopulate in another way. And what they wanted to do was flood the world, quite literally, with Caucasian babies. They wanted to whitewash everything. They whitewashed history. They've removed the true history of the earth and the civilizations on it in favor of the British Empire, suggesting that every invention from Nikola Tesla's to Isambard Kingdom Brunel, they're all Caucasian people, and giving this sort of false narrative that everything with regard to our technological progression has been at the hands of people that were some way connected to the British Empire and Caucasian. So in Germany, they started mass producing children. And the cloning technology has been around for 250,000 years. It's why we're here now. It's written in the Sumerian texts. It's the story that was then sort of bastardized and used in the Torah and then diluted even further and put into the Old Testament. So, the creation of us and then the removal of a rib to make another being, it's cloning. So this technology belongs with the Jesuit order and is operated and controlled by the Knights Templar, who are the protectors of it. But underneath all of that is the Rothschilds. They're the family that have the keys to everything. And Amun-Ra gave them everything when Amun-Ra fled. He left everything to his children. And people jokingly refer to the children of Amun-Ra, who was the most powerful pharaoh of them all. Obviously, he was an Anunnaki. He didn't look anything like we do. The children of Ra are referred to as the Ra-childs. So it's all there for people to see. So in Germany, they started mass producing, and this was done through cloning.
What? Okay, hold on, please. Just give me a minute to digest what you've just said. The
Sure.
Rothschilds, right? Is that what you're saying? The Rothschilds, because
yeah,
wow, that is
they're not
fascinating.
human. That family isn't human. They share similar DNA to us, but their blood and DNA isn't human. It's Anunnaki. They're more reptilian than we are, and that's why they're
Yes.
cold-blooded.
Yes.
That's why they thrive off our suffering, our pain and suffering. They're obviously, as most people know, they're not creative. They don't know how to love. They're very cold. So they look a little bit like us, but obviously their skulls. Jacob Rothschild would be a good example, and a lot of the pharaohs, their skulls are slightly elongated. So yeah, they're not us, but they wanted to repopulate with people that looked like us, and that happened in Germany. And they were grown in labs, laboratories, the same as we were when Enki and Enlil were messing around with, the Neanderthal and turning it into us. It's the same technology, but they did it in what we now refer to as DUMBs, these deep underground military bases, and they just happened to be in Germany. Germany had far more advanced technology, and still has today, than the rest of the world, because it was running off the back of Tartaria, when Tartaria was running off the back of Atlantis. So they were a lot more advanced, and they grew them in these underground bases that were disguised as farms, and they became children's nurseries. And so they jokingly, in plain sight, called them kindergartens, a garden that grew children. It's all very clever. Yeah, and it gets worse. It
Wow.
becomes more obvious from there. They thought of everything, but they've made some mistakes. And a series of postcards came out in the late 1800s that showed images of children being grown in cabbage patches, and these were known
Yes.
as Meadow Baby, Babylon Baby, or Cabbage Baby postcards. But slowly they changed, and they started becoming what's now known as repopulation postcards, because a lot of the postcards that were actually bought and sent across the world had information on the back, not just the address, but a little note to somebody saying, for example, you must buy one of these soon, they're selling out. I've got a couple, they're really sweet. And people were buying them. And these postcards are out there. I've included some in my books, but people can find them online. It's the reverse you want to be looking at, the reverse of these postcards. But some of them also show that they're growing monkeys and dogs too. So they were close. I think most people know that the pig is a hybrid. It's not a real naturally evolved being. They've created quite a few different things. Like the panda is another example. These weren't they hadn't evolved. They're animals that have been genetically created. So these postcards became really popular. They started out in Germany, they became popular in France and throughout Europe, then England, and then into America. And they were basically normalizing the thought of growing babies. And then to support that, the first narrated movie to ever be produced was called The Cabbage Fairy. And it's about a fairy that's growing babies in her garden, and that was followed by one called The Midwife to the Upper Classes. You can find them on YouTube still. The director, producer, and narrator and actress is Alice Guy Blanche. She was the first pioneer, if you like, in the movie world. Her whole backstory is a lie. And the second movie is people coming to her stall at her cabbage patch and plucking babies and selling them. Now, where the narrative goes a little bit skewed is that she said that she was inspired to make that first movie by seeing the incubator babies at the Paris World's Fair. The problem is that happened a year after the film came out. So there are holes in the story. But the babies were actually put through baby farms. They were also pushed through, the Jesuits again pushed them through the church. So a lot of children were put up for adoption, claiming to be unwanted from unwed young women. And they were also distributed and sold through the world's fairs as incubator babies. So there were several prongs to the attack. And they were, and they were all Caucasian, and you'll actually see a true representation of that in the Midwife to the Upper Classes movie by Alice Guy, where this couple turn up. She shows them a Caucasian baby, and they smile, and she puts it down, and then she picks up a black baby, and the couple say no, 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 and they put it down, and then she picks up another Caucasian baby, and the couple buy that one, and it's very clear what they're suggesting there. And of course, you know, there's information out there. There are notes out there, memoirs, and statements by very key people, leaders of the American government at the time, senior politicians, that stated they wanted to increase the Caucasian population in America and make it a white nation. And they spoke about that and wrote about it too. So it's not something that they hid. They wanted to reclassify anybody that wasn't Caucasian as savage and primitive. And therefore, they could claim their architecture, claim their technology, rewrite their history, and take credit for absolutely everything, and then weaponize it and earn from it, profit from it.
Makes a lot of sense what you're saying, and especially, you know, the repopulation into America, because I think, you know, if we're looking at how things have played themselves out over the past few decades, America certainly is a stronghold for those evil forces to target that country. That's for sure. Um, I'm interested as to know, just from a spiritual perspective as well. We've also had conversations of this nature on other shows. Like, firstly, whose DNA were they using to create these incubator babies? Were they the Rothschilds and their sort of select bloodlines that were being? Because when we speak to survivors, we often hear about them talking about their eggs being harvested. And they knew for sure that their eggs were being harvested in these programs as well. Um, Granted, a lot of the survivors that I deal with now are younger survivors. But, you know, we from really, let's say, the 40s, when the big mind control program started. I'm not sure, that's what I'm saying. I'm not sure how they did it before then. But since then, there's been a lot of survivors speaking about their eggs being harvested as well. I'm interested to know how they created these babies, from whose DNA. I mean, more than likely, and also when we're talking about the consciousness of these children, because when a baby is born and conceived in a natural way, there's the God spark as the egg and sperm meet, right? That create the life that is then grown within, which makes it that natural, beautiful experience. Are these kids? Because I've also heard from from other people speak that these kids are actually paired with like entities sometimes, you know, souls that are too low vibrating to actually get their own body. So they are then often paired with these created children as well. Or do they have their own consciousness? You see, that's also what I'd like to know from a soul perspective. What is that? Because there has to be something. They can't not have a soul, right? They wouldn't be operating. So, yeah, I'd love to hear your thought on that.
Well, we don't know. We don't know, you know, where the actual sperm and eggs came from. Nobody knows that. Not at our rung, anyway. Higher up the ladder, of course, this information will be known. But what we do know is the reason for the swab testing and the ancestry.com type websites that are offering genealogy services by sending your DNA in, that they are looking for certain people. But who actually fathered them, we don't know. But if you look at what happened in Germany during the Second World War, That was the extermination. I mean, all wars are to get rid of architecture and certain people. But in Germany, they were actually removing the Tartarian people. That is what they
Yeah.
were looking to
Yes.
do. And
Yes.
the Germans were hunting for, Churchill's brother, a cousin, I beg your pardon, Churchill's cousin, um, who was the Chancellor of Germany at the time, whose name that I don't know if we're allowed to mention on here, the man with the little moustache, Winston Churchill's cousin and closest ally, set out to
Hitler
help the British.
Rothschild.
Oh
Adolf
yeah,
Rothschild.
we can say it then. So yeah, obviously they're both
Adolf
Rothschilds.
Rothschild.
They worked together to remove as much architecture and as many people as possible, and they do it in the guise of war. Um, and what they were looking for were the Aryans. Now, there's a lot of there's a great misconception, I suppose, over the Aryans. The Aryans were Aryan means lordly, and they're Scythians. So these are Tartarian people that were priests, high priests, that carried the information on how sacred geometry and frequency and vibration work, how you can build without having to use cranes, machinery, how you can cut blocks perfectly without the tools that were at the common disposal at the time, the hammer and chisel. They carried this information. Hiram Abiff, the first Freemason, had that information. That's what they were looking for. They were trying to find that bloodline, and they're still trying to find it today. And that bloodline, blood group, is Rh null. That's what they were searching for. They wanted that sacred knowledge. So it was nothing about creating an Aryan race at all. That's just myth. They'd already repopulated with Caucasians. They were trying to remove people from the previous civilization. And war is the best way to do that. You can get the public through bombing campaigns,
Wow.
and you can get rid of the male population by getting them to kill each other. Um, with
Totally.
the with regard to the soul, I suppose you could call it in a similar way, um, a kind of similar situation to IVF. So what we're basically saying is, obviously, we were all cloned to start with. Our very creation started off with someone being created in a laboratory and then cloned to produce and tweaked to produce a female version. That's how we began. It's in the Old Testament. It's everywhere, wherever you want to look, unless you follow Darwin's theory of evolution. So to say that a clone hasn't got a soul, which is what Dolores Cannon said, I disagree with, because I think everything that is alive has a spark. And now the
Right.
connection is stronger with some people than it is with others. So approximately
Mm.
80% of the population of Earth do not have the same connection. And that is because 80% of the population right now descend from clones totally that were repopulated in the 1800s. And so their information doesn't go back any further than that. The memory we carry in our DNA, this genetic memory we carry in this sort of database that we've got inside us, it doesn't go back much further. So they don't have built into them the information that's telling them subliminally that this isn't how we're supposed to live. Don't take that medical intervention. Don't drink water from the tap. Be wary of EMF and so on. This music's the wrong frequency. Don't listen to it. Turn the news off. Don't watch TV. That's all built in to people that we consider awake. But 80% of the world can't be woken up. That there isn't a way of waking them up. They don't have that genetic memory. There's nothing that will resonate. So it doesn't matter whether you show them information on the dangers of taking the next vaccine or whatever you show them, or the chemtrails in the sky. They will not recognize those as anything other than condensation. It doesn't matter what you do. So I think we've got to accept the fact that we're going to, as things ramp up, we're going to lose a lot of those. It will be the people that are awake that survive this current Great Reset. And that's because we have the warning triggers built in. So the reason that people are awake is because their ancestry goes back further. They're carrying genetic memory that goes hundreds and hundreds of
Makes so
years.
much sense.
Yeah, but Dolores
Wow.
Cannon said that they're soulless, and I don't think anything's soulless. I mean, we don't even know what a soul is. It's
No,
just a word we use. It's, you know, what exactly is it? But I think it's a connection. It's a connection
I
to
think,
the source.
yes, absolutely. It's that strong soul connection where you carry the light, the spark of God, or creator God, or source within you, and you have no doubt. It's like the sun that shines brighter in some, I guess, than in others. The sun is there, but it's like still behind the clouds, maybe,
Mm.
if you want to use that analogy. But it's interesting, Dolores Cannon is well known, by the way, for having been trained in the Luciferian system. So it would not surprise me if she would spread that type of misinformation, because that's
Mm.
kind of what they do. You know, that really is what these agents or assets, they're not called assets for no reason. And, I think
No,
we tend to
exactly.
think an asset is a James Bond guy that goes running around on the side of like sinking vessels and gets away with
Mm.
it. That's not
Mm.
an asset, right? An asset is really, I mean, if you are born and bred into the system, or if they've taken you in for some reason, they use you in whichever way they deem fit. They will program you, they will control you, they will make you say whatever
Mm.
they need to say. I have an interesting, someone has left a comment here, Guy. Cabbage Patch Kids in the scripted story with esoteric meaning is satanic. They weren't really Cabbage Patch Kids. So someone is actually questioning whether, well, more like making a statement as to the Cabbage Patch Kids. What's your take on that comment? I'd be interested to know.
Yeah, well, obviously, first of all, um, it would be interesting to see their research. I imagine they've got considerable and a considerable amount of research. Perhaps they can share. So that would be interesting to see that. But the reason that they use cabbage is twofold. One, the cabbage in Slavic folklore represented a womb. And cabbage is actually also referred to cabbage night, which was then mischief night, which became Halloween. But cabbage also refers to cabotage. Cabotage law is part of admiralty and maritime law, and it refers to the transportation of one thing to another place by ship, and that's how these children were moved. So they use several. There are several connections. So that's why cabbage is symbolic because of the connection in Slavic folklore to the womb. And on cabbage night, mischief night, Halloween night, traditionally, girls would go and pluck a cabbage from a garden. The quality of the cabbage determined the quality of their future husband. They would then, as mischief, throw the cabbage at someone's door and run away. And the cabbage was always seen as a womb. Now, there's a statue outside the maternity hospital in Tomsk in Russia that shows a cabbage with a baby emerging from it, and it's called I Am Anna. And a lot of people kiss it when they go in to have their baby. They kiss it on the head if they want a girl, and they kiss it lower down the face if they want a boy. And so cabbages in Slavic folklore represent a womb. So that's why they're called Cabbage Patch babies, and that's why they're depicted in cabbages, because it actually goes back to Slavic folklore. But the reason that they stuck with the name is because it's connected with cabotage law, which is the transportation of things, which included people from one country to another by ship. So no, it's nothing. It's not satanic at all. There's nothing. It's got nothing to do with that. I mean, let's be honest. The whole thing is nefarious, but it's not actually suggesting that because if 80% of the population derive from cloning, then that would suggest that 80% of the population are in some way carrying some sort of satanic bloodline or whatever in them. And it's not the case at all.
I agree with you there. I mean, there's so much controversy at the moment about Nephilim bloodlines and what have you, and who's the.
Yeah, we hear it all the time, and I always say the same thing to people. Everybody, none of us know for sure the whole truth. There are people out there that believe they do, but with some information, a lot of people have a very strong opinion without actually having anything to substantiate it. They just either have a strong belief of something or a gut feeling about something. And we all do, to a certain extent, have thoughts and feelings on different subjects. But the problem is, because so much of our information and our history has been buried from us, nobody really knows the truth. And I always say the same thing to people. I would much rather have somebody, and it would have to be somebody who had access to the Vatican vaults. Sorry, laughter needs to get down now. I would much rather have somebody that's credible with real information show me that everything I knew about Tartaria or everything I knew about the world and life was wrong than carry on believing something that's a lie, because I can start again with the right information. But I don't tend to take opinions as evidence of something because I can't substantiate them. So when I'm giving a talk or I am being interviewed, I can't say, well, Mr. Blog said blah blah blah, so I'm now running with that. I look for numerous sources of information that are suggesting the same thing, and then spend a good 3, 4, even 5 years digging into that subject before I even put it out there. So I have to go on the most likely answer rather than just a gut feeling or an opinion. You can
Right.
look at the population boom as well, the baby boom it's called. You can look at that. There was a huge spike in the population at a time when 3/4 of the population of the world had died, had been killed. At the same time, we have a huge population boom. So you can if you look at the population facts, if you get hold of, because I use old encyclopedias. I don't use obviously Google or Wikipedia to get my information from because it's silly. I have a collection. You might be able to see them behind me. A lot of those books are late 1700s, early 1800s, and they contain information on populations, religions, cultures, and so on. And basically, all you need is a pen and paper and a calculator, and you can see that it's impossible to quadruple a population in 100 years when the 3/4 of the population had died. So and they're all babies, of course, all children. So it's easy to do if you've got the right information. You can, 2 and 2.
It's And I love that because I really appreciate the succinct way in which you've clearly researched this, connected the dots, and obviously really telling us what is obvious and
Yeah.
how, as you say, the Cabbage Patch Kids, their true origin suddenly makes so much sense.
Mm.
It's done in eyes, like right in front of you, using words that have double meanings or whatever the case might be.
Yeah, they're
So,
good at
as you
that.
say, totally. And, repopulating the world with orphans. So, literally creating children, Caucasian children, white babies, because they wanted to repopulate the world after the wars and destruction and uh, um, outbreaks of diseases and what have you. So the children, the mothers are sent to asylums where,
Mm.
who knows, they probably became breeders there as well. I
Yeah,
mean,
they
if
did.
we, oh, wow. So you see that, oh my gosh, no, 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 hang on. That just opens up a whole new can of worms, but I want to get there in a minute. Because so basically taking the kids away from their mom because the mother's now in a lunacy asylum because the father was killed at war and she cannot look after the kids, so the kids get taken over by the state, funneled through the system on orphan trains and what have you to different countries. In the meantime, a whole new generation of white babies has been created in laboratories, no doubt with upper echelons DNA and intermingled with a whole lot of other DNA as well, just so that they don't completely have the Habsburg jaw, whatever it might be. They've got to at least be
Yeah.
able to eat their food, or right. So I would imagine, and wow, and then of course using the mothers. Speak to us on what happened to the mothers that were put into these asylums then, Guy. This just
Well,
sounds
you were quite
horrific to
right
me.
with what you said. I mean, these asylums were turned into sort of a production line. They were constantly pregnant. And this was still going on in the Second World War in Germany. So yeah, the women were constantly pregnant, and this happened as well in convents. So the young girls that were, considered waifs or strays were taken into convents. They were impregnated naturally, but obviously not willingly. And in some cases the babies didn't come out quite right. There would be the odd problem, and they were usually buried in the grounds of these asylums and the convents, and that's why we see so many mass graves being found. But they were normally then shipped through baby farms. Um, a lady called Amelia Dyer was perhaps the most prolific in England. She shipped thousands of babies all across the world. And some of the babies that were taken in, you see, the baby farms were advertised as somewhere you could take your baby if you didn't want people to know that you were pregnant. So you would disappear for a while, and then you would take your baby when it's born to the baby farm, and then you would pay for its upkeep. And then once you were married or your circumstances improved, you would go and collect your baby. But by that time, the baby had long gone. And any that didn't quite look right, or that were unwanted for whatever reason, they were destroyed. And she was actually, if people Google her, I mean, I know Google is the last place you go for information, but if people Google Amelia Dyer, she is still the most notorious serial killer in British history,
Mm.
because of the number of babies that she had to dispose of that didn't meet certain requirements. So yeah, any young mother or young woman was considered fair game, and they were used to repopulate. And they tried to do that in the Second World War with the genetics. They were looking at genetics then and trying to create what they considered to be the perfect person, which is, of course, focusing very much on the obey gene, that command that we have programmed into us to do what we're told. So they were looking to really reproduce with people that will do what they're told and not question anything. And that is where we come into this soulless area from Dolores Cannon, or what today we refer to as sheep, or NPCs, people who will not question the narrative. They'll follow everything they're told to do without perhaps giving it a second thought. Don't get me wrong, there are people out there that are wide awake, that have found themselves in a situation where they have to take a vaccine or have to do something they don't want to do, and I understand fully. But the majority of people that are awake would rather, would rather die than submit. And so yeah,
It,
that's the problem we've got, and that's why sheep are the flock, the congregation, the herd. That's why they're referred to in that way.
the herd mentality, absolutely.
Mm.
And it makes a lot of sense what you're saying, because when you were saying about the DNA that was used, it's their DNA, and I guess made pliable, by them, controllable. So they would
Yeah.
be looking for that species, which makes me wonder about, I don't know if you know, South African author Michael Tellinger wrote the book Slave
Yeah.
Species of God. Literally, yeah. So we're talking about disconnected DNA. What do you say about that? Do you have any thoughts on that? When we're looking at the fact that we actually have 12 strands of DNA, and the average human is really operating on the double helix. So, what is your take on that? Because that would mean we are compliant if we only have two active strands.
Yeah, the idea with that is connected to our pineal gland. That's where our
Right.
connection actually takes place, and it's calcified in many cases. So that's something that they've targeted from the moment we're born. So to break that connection, our pineal gland is what they focus on, which is calcified by fluoride, usually toothpaste and
Yes.
water. But there's another connection there as well that's broken. And that is, if we're thinking about meditating, praying, or talking to the creator, your God, whatever that is to you, you'll look up to the sky. And the Gnostics studied this in great detail. By breaking the connection between you and the heavens, you can no longer ascend, either spiritually or actually, you know, when you pass on. So by putting metal in the sky, particles of metal, it breaks the connection. And that is what a lot of people believe is connected to the chemtrailing. So that connection is being sabotaged, really. So if you can't any longer communicate or have that strong connection, then you become more
Mm,
obedient. So
absolutely. We
that's something
lost.
that's worth looking into. But it's your pineal gland that they target.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, obviously, and with all, and also this 5G technology and stuff
Mm,
that they've been rolling out since however long, it really does keep those who are in that metal space, technology space. In my mind, it's all metal, bzz, bzz, control, right?
yeah,
Um, where you can just get pulled along. It's like a tide, right? A tide in the ocean just slowly pulls you along. You don't even know you're being pulled until you look back and see, oh my gosh, I was down there a minute ago. Um, so it's crazy when we look at it like that. And really, the bottom line is when you are connected to your creator, your source, God, as you say, whatever you choose to call it, there's no ways you can be knocked off center. You are then like a tree with roots, right? And even the storm can come and blow the leaves and branches, but the trunk is firm and the roots are strong, and you will replenish again. You know, it's that kind of thing. So when we understand that, but it's so true what you're saying. Every imaginable method has been used
mm,
to try to get us to forget who we are. And really, Guy, I think the only way that we're going to remember is when we decide to put down all of our nonsense, all of our technology, all of our issues that keeps us disconnected. I mean, even if we are partially cloned, doesn't mean that we don't have will or free will. We will always have free will. We've just got to dig a little bit deeper, right, into our cellular being or our spiritual being to wake up. Unfortunately, some of us have had shitty parents, and that makes a big, big difference in someone's how they turn out in life. But still, that doesn't mean that we are not responsible. We have to stop blaming people or other people at some point. I don't
yeah,
know.
I
What's
totally
your
agree.
take?
I
Mm,
totally agree with that. I mean, my mother was fantastic. She was a brilliant mum. Well, while we were growing up, but she was a little bit distant. And my dad was very very strict, strong Roman Catholic upbringing, boarding school, and so on. Whereas my mother's Jewish, and had a completely different outlook. Um, and we were, you know, I went through hell and back as a child. I used to run away a lot. I used to go to school with black eyes, and the kids and the teachers would ask me where the black eye came from. I had an unpleasant childhood. But when my mum was there on her own, I had a nice time, just when my dad was there. But he passed on how he was raised. He thought that being heavy-handed was the solution. You beat your child to do what it's supposed to do. Um, And you know, I spent a long time carrying that around with me, but it didn't do me any good, because all I'm doing is dragging up the past and reminding myself of a traumatic experience that I can't do anything about. I can't go back and change it. I need to move on. And I think the bottom line with it all is everybody's waiting for someone to come and save them. God will save me. The government will save me. The police, if I ring them, they'll save me. This person will save me. That's going to happen. The white hats are going to save us. You save yourself. You've got to stop waiting for someone to come along and pick up the pieces. You've got to do the work yourself. If you want to be saved, there are things you can do right now. You know, and you can break free of the system. We've all got to dip in it to work and function, but we don't have to be dependent upon it. And we've got to stop waiting for someone to come and fix everything for us. Change starts with you. You know, and I tell people all the time, you know, look at what you eat. You know, I won't use, I don't, with the exception of the internet, which, you know, I shouldn't use as much as I do. I won't use anything that's wireless because of the EMS. You know, we filter our water. We don't buy, you know, fake food. We're very careful. We don't go to the doctor. Doesn't matter what, we don't go to the doctor. I always jokingly say to my mum, if I'm really, really ill, then I'll ring 999 and I will get an ambulance. Of course, 999 is an inversion of 666, so I don't want to ring them unless I really need to. So you know, I try and find the ways to live and eat and sort of, I suppose, live how my grandparents and great grandparents did. But I stopped asking for help, you know, for someone to come along and wave a magic wand a long time ago, because they're not coming. You know, and I think we have to understand that we are responsible for ourselves, and we have to take responsibility for ourselves and stop having this sort of mass Stockholm syndrome, where we're looking for people to help us, and often the very people and systems we despise. So I think change comes from within, and you know, that's kind of, I suppose, my thoughts on it. That it doesn't matter what happened yesterday. It doesn't matter what's happening tomorrow, and you can't drag your trauma around with you for the rest of your life. At some point, you've got to draw a line in the sand and say, that's it. Today's the beginning of the rest of my life. I'm not carrying around that baggage anymore. And also look at what you do and who you do it with. You know, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most of your time with. And if they're negative, if they're asleep, fully jabbed, and watch the news constantly, then they might not be right for you. And you might have to sever some ties with people that you love. And I've had to do that. I will not be in the same room with certain people that once I ran to, because I can't have that energy and that mindset in my life. So you've got to make some tough decisions. The only sad thing with it all is, because of what's coming, you know, we're sort of looking at the next pandemic, the Marburg virus. You know, the mass vaccination program for children that's happening in schools, certainly here in the UK. We know we're going to lose a lot of people over the next couple of years, an awful lot of people, and it's going to be horrible. But we've got to survive. You know, whatever they throw at us, we've got to be here to support the people that are just waking up, and to help them. And that's kind of what I see my role as, to be there to support somebody who's just woken up and had a light bulb moment and realized everything they've been told is a lie. And you know, I'm just trying to help those. And what I'm not doing is trying to ram my messages down the throats of people that can't be woken. I've accepted the fact that is 80% of the world, and to not waste my time. You know, in the Bible, even Jesus, I mean, I don't believe a lot of the Bible because of what's happened to it, you know, the bastardization of it, and the removal of some very key information. And obviously the King James Bible being written in favor of having a ruling monarch. But you know, allegedly Jesus,
copyrighted by the royal family.
And still owned. Yeah, the Crown still own the copyright, so they profit from every copy sold. And and if people look into King James and who he really was, you'd never buy anything or read
Yes.
anything associated with someone who, got his 12-year-old bride pregnant while he was having an affair with two men. That's not my kind of person. And was considered the most vile person to ever walk through the doors of Parliament and sit on a throne. He was considered absolutely disgusting by even his closest
Yes.
friends. So why you would
Yeah.
support something he bastardized in favor of himself, I've no idea. You need to read something older than that, the older original version of it, perhaps. But yeah, for me, if you look at Jesus and the story of Jesus, even he didn't waste his time with people. He would tell everyone his message, and the people that weren't prepared to listen and didn't want to listen, he didn't ram it down their throat or try and convince them. He moved on. And I think
Yeah,
that that's what we've got
absolutely.
to do. Yeah, we've got to use our energy wisely. And also it's dangerous to try and wake someone up that's not supposed to, because you can shatter everything that they've believed, and I don't think that we have the right to do that.
It's so true. I think, the cognitive dissonance has really revealed itself over the past 5 years, especially. In the beginning, I think, like so many others, I was so frustrated, with just the sleepwalkers, as I call them. But
Yeah,
I'm very much in line with what you're saying in terms of, if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. For those of us who are going to move on and understand what this has been about, for many of us, it's been the biggest wake up call ever,
mm,
and a blessing in so many ways, right? But unfortunately, also for so many others, it's been tragic. I mean, the death toll. I mean, the last time I heard, which was quite a while ago, probably about a year now, has been 20 million of unexplained died suddenly, over the past 5 years,
5 years.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So it's huge, and
yeah,
it's very concerning what you're saying about now suddenly bringing in all these extra jabs for the kids at school.
yeah.
Um, so we as parents have to assert our authority over our kids at times like this. We have to. And if your school won't take you, then you homeschool. That's where we're at, because either that or your child, I mean, can literally lose their life. I've interviewed a South African woman, Adi Shab, um, who unfortunately, Jack, her boy, passed away 2 years ago now, I think. But for over 30 years, she was his caregiver. But basically, the jab injury that turned him completely autistic. And this is just one child. There are hundreds and thousands of other unreported cases that, of course, mainstream media doesn't cover. And it's the same thing with the COVID thing. And now, as you say, there's a whole nother one coming in that they're now enforcing on kids at school.
Mm.
Oh, don't they always just get us with our kids? I mean, that is just so disgustingly annoying. Um, but yeah, we have to assert authority over our kids. If your child can't go to school because of the jab, I mean, we've got to think about that as a massive decision in life. That's not just, oh well, I'll take him next week then. This is a life-changing decision you make. This is all about you, your children, your future, health, well-being. Very interesting, guy. Very, very
Mm.
interesting. Wow.
Yeah, and I think the reason that they're targeting children is twofold. One is because they need to reduce the population. That is their key
Right.
here. I mean, the World Economic Forum are talking about it openly, that we are useless eaters. You can look at the Georgia Guidestones, and there's lots of examples out there of them saying very clearly that, particularly on the World Economic Forum stage, that we are overpopulated, and of course we aren't. But when they targeted in 2020 the elderly population, that didn't pull on the heartstrings as much as they had hoped. And yes, I accept the fact that it was just a trial run for what's coming. But by targeting children, it's more powerful because it will stop, like you said, children being able to go to certain schools unless they've had the jab. But also what it will do is it will cause problems with friendship groups, because you will not only have children that are no longer allowed to play with other children because yours hasn't had the jab, so they can't go and play with their friend anymore who has. You'll have the opposite, where people don't want their children to be, in confined spaces with children that have had it. But also you're going to have
Yes.
parents who are completely brainwashed, that will say, you are endangering my child's life. You can't go near my child anymore. And that, I fear, will become violent. And that is
Yeah.
what they want. They want us to hate each other. And the best way they can do that is through the children. Because your children, you're not going to die for your grandparents, or maybe your parents. You're going to accept the fact they're older than you. They're going to go before you, and you don't maybe want them to. I understand that. But you will die for your children. There's nothing you won't do for your kids, unless you're a very strange person who shouldn't have had them to start with. There's nothing you won't do for your children. I'd drop down dead now for my children. It wouldn't hesitate. And I've said to them,
Absolutely.
if I'm compatible and you ever need a heart transplant, you just need to tell me what hospital to go to, and I will, in the reception area. It's not a problem. I wouldn't even bat an eyelid. But what would I do to someone else who is putting my children at risk if I believe everything the mainstream are telling me? And that is very clever. So not only will they get rid of a whole generation of people, because obviously we know in these vaccines they're sterilizing. It's really
Yeah.
affecting the sex organs. The sexual chemistry of these children is being severely disrupted. But at the same time, you're going to stop them from being able to reproduce, but also you're going to wipe them out too. So the ones
Yeah.
that do survive are probably going to find it hard to have children themselves. And that is the Marburg virus. So it's basically the metals in the winter flu vaccine that kids are being forced to take at school now. And they're going to crank up 5G, just like they did in 2020 in China when they turned those first 100 masks on and people were dropping in the street. That's what we're going to see here. And its nickname is the zombie virus. And it's actually based upon a film with Dustin Hoffman called Outbreak. So if people want to see
Yeah.
exactly what they're planning, I'm not saying this is definitely coming, but this is what is being sort of put out there, and in particular by a top virologist in Australia who shared the information with me to start with. They want people to be scared, to be so scared, even the ones that they think are awake will go rushing for the vaccine when they see people dropping in the road outside their house or work. That's the idea. And it's suggested that it's going to happen spring, maybe May time. And incidentally, here in the UK, from the 28th of May, an act has gone through Parliament that gives the World Health Organization full control of Britain in the event of another pandemic. So I think they're going to time it. And of course, that is why we're seeing a lot of young lads that are arriving on our shores of military serving age. They're the ones that are being trained to police it. They're going to be uniformed, and that's the reason for this immigration crisis that we have. They are the new army.
Oh my gosh.
You can
Again, what
connect
you've
all the
just said
dots, can't
suddenly
you?
resonates. Yes, it makes it suddenly, it's like everything is just resonating. For years now, we've
Mm,
been seeing, the last 2, 3 years especially, a lot of, as you say, military aged men that
mm.
are going to other continents. And I mean, really, it's what you're saying. They're rearming the
Yeah,
population.
yeah, with
Wow.
people that don't have an allegiance to us, because
Yes,
it's going to be very
exactly.
difficult for a lot of police officers and a lot of soldiers here to turn against their own people. But of course, if you come here with no
Exactly.
no connection, and no empathy towards us. There's no relationship, but you are, you know, considered to be here illegally, treated very badly. There's a lot of hostility towards them. They're going to be more than happy to put the boot in and kick the door down and drag you off to get your jab. And what they will do is then they'll reinforce this with the digital ID. It's important we have that information to know if you've been vaccinated. You've got to carry that on you at all times. This is a massive problem. You're going to kill people. You've got to have that on you. And that's when we've got to boycott anywhere that asks for it, even if it means we have to go without. So it's all coming together. But the problem is they're rushing it, and it's backfired, because here the people that are asleep are seeing digital ID as an invasion of privacy. And that also the same people that are asleep are seeing the immigration crisis as people coming here and stealing our jobs and being put up in luxury hotels. They're not actually looking at really why they're coming here, that they're actually being brought over here. They're not looking at that, and they wouldn't understand that if you tried to explain it. But they're still on the streets fighting about it, or rather protesting about it. So it doesn't really matter why they're out there screaming their heads off about it all. The fact that they are, it is brilliant. We have got pushback, massive pushback and resistance now. But if you want to point the finger at anybody, wherever you are in the world, it's Tony Blair. That is the person people should be looking at very, very closely. Do some digging. He's behind all of it. He was behind the pandemic. He's behind digital ID.
Tony Blair. Well, maybe you can explain that, because I mean, we know Tony Blair's obviously the ex-prime minister of the UK, right?
Yeah.
But how I mean, we hear a lot about Soros, we're hearing a lot about Fauci, Bill Gates, blah blah blah. Tony Blair, talk to us about him.
Well, he's above all of them. Now, I'm given an awful lot of information, and there is an MI5 document that actually refers to him as being the Antichrist. Now, it doesn't actually say it's exactly in those words, but it refers to him in a very nefarious way. Also, his autobiography is worth people not buying, but see if you can find a little bit of it, some extracts from it online, because in that he makes references to himself being the Antichrist as well. When he first came into power, the images that started circulating in the media depicted him as the devil. Dolores Cannon and Nostradamus, they predicted that the third Antichrist would appear at a particular time on the banks of the River Nile. At that exact time, Tony Blair bought land on the banks of the River Nile with his wife. Tony Blair, after the illegal war in the Middle East, became the Middle East peace envoy. Tony Blair runs the show. He is perhaps the most powerful person there is. His surname is not Blair. He's a Rothschild. His whole history is fabricated. He was put into power, into a position where he would become in power a very long time ago. So if you look at who's running the British government right now, you'll see that actually behind it, it's Tony Blair. And this isn't hidden. He is the advisor to Keir Starmer. He was even the advisor with the Conservative parties. He runs everything. And he is the person that is pushing the One World Faith Foundation. He's got people like Peter Thiel donating millions of pounds into it. He wants to create a new religion which he heads, and that is prophesized that at the end of time or times, sorry, that all religion will fail. People will look for their God and it won't appear, and then a savior will arrive who will actually be the Antichrist. That's Tony Blair's One World Faith organization. Tony Blair's the driving force behind digital ID, and his son Ewan owns the company that are going to be implementing it. So if people want to dig, there is some information on my website about him. There's also some information on the next pandemic on my website, so they can actually take that information and then go on and do some digging themselves. But yeah, Tony Blair's the person that people need to be watching very, very closely.
I am fascinated by what you're saying. It, and again, it just like ting, ting, ting. Because when we look back in history on this planet,
Oh, sorry, someone's just made a comment about Tom Cohen. Yes, absolutely, Tom Cohen. Yeah, he's someone to watch. But also bear in mind that there are several predictions of sorry, there are predictions of several antichrists. But Cohen's work is interesting. But it's worth reading what Cohen wrote about Trump as well. They're talking about Cohen there. I just saw that pop up. I thought that
yeah, yeah,
name, I
yeah.
immediately saw that. But yeah, so there's actually supposed to be several, but it's not Charles. Charles is a bit of a false flag, and I think Charles has been replaced anyway.
Yeah, I don't think it's Charles. I don't think it's Charles at all.
No, a lot of people did,
But
especially with that Baphomet painting that suddenly
yeah,
appeared, that bright red painting.
they wouldn't make it as obvious as that. To me, if it's going to be anything there, it's going to be one of the kids in the background or whatever, you know.
Mm.
Um, but it's so true what you were saying about Blair, because when you look at the history of wars on this planet, the British have the most despicable track record for being right there. I mean, it is the Brits who started, in fact, Prince Philip, who started child trafficking. The child trafficking rings were already up in South Africa and Africa, right? And now you go look at Cecil John Rhodes, who was the first
Oh,
British Prime
don't.
Minister. Yeah, no, no. He was I mean, he was just on the side note, he was actually kicked out by the Rhodes family from what I'm hearing because he was so disgusting. Came to Africa. They set out their rings here. Prince Philip was the main handler for the child trafficking rings in South Africa. And yeah, Peter Daniel Rhodes, who was the handler of Beverly Rhodes, who's one of my regular guests. She was living in South Africa and was the psychic for the ex-presidents here, with Peter Daniel Rhodes. So, and she was kicked out in 1999 and had I think, what is it? I think it's called an indictment where you can't talk for 25 years. She's just started talking. And I tell you, it's crazy when we hear the stories and how the British government and the US government, the allies, were actually the most depraved out of
Mm.
everyone. I mean, the things they've gotten up to and the beautiful picture they've painted for themselves as these innocent little, uh, no, I mean,
No, they're
it's
just absolutely disgusting. I despise them, and they've got no right to sit on the throne either. They're not the real royal bloodline. They're not the real royal family. They shouldn't. They shouldn't be sat on the throne. I totally agree. And if you actually, I've done a lot of digging on that. And before Queen Victoria, there weren't any white royal families out there. So they've not only whitewashed our history, they've whitewashed the monarchy too. Um, and
absolutely.
so, Sir Cecil Rhodes, not that he should be referred to as a sir, or maybe that's exactly what we should do. The serve of the crown. Um, he founded the Society of the Elect. He is the person that is responsible for the First World War, and it was the Rothschilds that financed it. Um, that is a despicable family, and of course they're all cut from the same cloth. They're all
Mm.
related in one way or another. But I totally agree. The British Empire, which is still alive and well, it's the city of London, and obviously the Roman Empire, which is the Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican, are still very much pulling the strings as well. They're alive and
Mm-hmm.
kicking. And yeah, I actually when I travel, I often apologise for being British. I say that I'm so sorry, but I'm British, and obviously I'd never say I'm from the United Kingdom because I'm not. I'm not part of that corporation. I'm not an employee. But I actually apologise that I am from Britain, and I'm sorry. I'm sure at some point in our past we came here, raped and pillaged, and took what didn't belong to us, and made everybody's lives a damn sight harder for it as a direct result. But of course, I do it tongue in cheek because nothing obviously to do with me, but I do it jokingly.
Sure.
So I'm the reverse of one of these you'll see wearing a Union Jack t-shirt, getting drunk, taking over, Spain or somewhere. I kind of the reverse. I actually go there trying to hide the fact that I'm from England.
Right. I mean, imagine being a South African in our current politics, and most on my mother's side, strong British German. On my father's side, strong British Dutch. So I'm the combination of the Brits and the Dutch mainly. And of course, in this country, it is believed that it was the Dutch, the Hollanders, who started apartheid. So the Afrikaans language is actually seen as the Hollanders, but it's actually not from the Hollanders. It's a combination of English, Dutch,
Mm.
German, just the whole, of that the African people started speaking. So that we could all understand each other, not just the African people, everyone. But it is commonly believed here, that it was the Hollanders, the Dutch, that started apartheid, but it was not. It was the British. The
Yeah,
British are the
yeah,
worst
absolutely. Yeah.
culprits. They are the architects of apartheid. There was the Anglo-Boer War, where the Brits
Mm.
had the Dutch women and children in concentration camps and starved them and beat them. And no, the Brits came across and pa 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 pa. They always like
Yeah.
to say, "Here we are, we own it now. Off you go, you mere mortals. This
Mm.
belongs to us."
Yeah.
Um, so imagine being a South African in South Africa now, when you're half British, half Dutch. You've got to apologize for both your ancestors.
Yeah, yeah. Well, my wife's family fled. They were from my wife's from Tanzania. She's East African, and they fled. They had their bank frozen, his business, her father's business taken away from him, the land taken, and they actually fled to England, and were put in a block of flats. In a really rough part of London, and she spent the next 10 years being called a Paki when she's not. She's mixed race, but she's not. There's no Pakistan bloodline in her whatsoever. So she grew up being sort of having racist abuse hurled at her when she's actually Tanzanian. They even got the country and the continent entirely wrong, but that didn't stop them. But they're a bit more acceptive here now. But yeah, she went through. What happened. Well, what happened not just in Africa, but all over the world, is horrific, and people need to know the truth about what really went on and who was really responsible for all of this. And most
Oh, yeah.
coups are financed by the deep state, the CIA, the British Empire, in one way or
Absolutely.
another. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But interesting. Sorry, just to go back to what you were saying earlier on. I've seen pictures from, I do believe it also Tartarian times, maybe 1400s, where you actually literally seeing photographs taken then of African kings, the kings and queens of that time, the Moors, I think it was. They were African, dark skinned people, and
Mm.
the Caucasians were bowing down to African kings. So, this nonsense that, African people did not know how to create, were this monkey race, didn't know anything. The Brits, came here and taught them how to do. I mean, what a load of baloney, right? It's
Yeah.
embarrassing, actually,
Mm.
Guy. It's embarrassing that's what our forefathers went and did. Because when you're looking back at true history, it is absolutely, I mean, it's a rich culture. I mean, it's not just one. I mean, there's different cultures that obviously came together. But the African culture is very rich in their libraries, their waterways, I mean, fishing, absolutely super advanced when you're looking at it
Mm.
like that. So I'm not surprised African people are mad. I would be too, when you've had that much suppression.
Yeah.
But wow, we've got to, right. right now we've kind of got to all get through this together. We've all been lied to.
Yeah, we have,
We've
and we've
all
got to
been.
unite.
Mm,
We've got to
mm,
unite. We've got to put aside our differences, and we've got to agree to disagree on certain things, and we've just got to stand together because they want us divided. Because it's a lot easier to deal with small groups than it is a collective, and I think that that's what really is the answer to this. That we agree to disagree on certain things, but accept the fact that we all have a common goal, that we want to end this. We don't want to live like this anymore, and we're tired, and we know what they're doing. And I think the game's nearly up. I think too many people
yeah,
are now aware of what's really going on, and I do think that unity is the answer, and divide and conquer. They've been doing that for a very very long time, and perhaps
yeah.
now we can move on from there. Um,
Move
you know, you,
beyond.
but they give us lots of reasons to hate each other. It can be the color of your skin, and I despise racism. On every single
Totally.
aspect of it, I despise it. It's disgusting that someone would judge someone based on the color of their skin. But they've used religion, they've used sport as well, and of course this really clever tactic with the pandemic. Now, if you target children, you know, you're putting my son or my daughter's life at risk, because you haven't had it. You can't see your grandchildren anymore. You can't see, your niece and nephew anymore. It's very, very clever. We just got to be strong and brave and just get through this because we're going to come out
Yeah,
on top. But they reckon
yeah,
2032 is going to be, when this will actually end. So we've got a bumpy ride, another 6 years of this nonsense. But
yeah.
you know,
Makes sense. I was also saying, I reckon for the next 5 years or so.
mm,
Um, yeah,
be interesting to
2030 is
see what
going.
happens though, 4th of July this year,
Yeah.
because that will mark 250 years since New World Order and since Satan's Little
Wow.
Season. So they've got to mark that, haven't they? Somehow, something's got to
Yeah.
happen. They did a bit of damage on New Year's Eve, but it'd be interesting to see what the 4th of July brings.
Well, you guys out there, 4th of July this year, 250 years of freedom for the New World Order. Because that's really what it's about. Isn't that America's Freedom Day? Right, 4th of July.
Yeah, one big
And
lie. Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, 250 years since they
Wow.
started ruining and poisoning the lives of innocent people. Yeah.
And that's how long this has been going on. It makes a lot of sense what you're saying, that they've had this technology for that amount of time as well, because of
Mm,
course they would have, because it's all angelic or archonic technology,
mm,
right?
mm.
So it would make sense. And yeah, wow. Wow, wow, wow.
Mhm.
Guy, what a pleasure talking to you, and really, really fascinating.
It's a
So
pleasure.
I could definitely have us here for the whole day, but I will be a little bit compassionate that you also need some downtime.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm working on my audio book at the moment, and I've got quite a
I'm
few
looking forward
chapters.
to that.
Yeah,
I'm
but
looking
yeah, so
forward
it's
to
just my
that.
my third book, the audio book. So I've got to try and somehow get through the editing of all of that. I don't do the narration. I can't do it. I'm no good at it. But I've got to listen to that this afternoon. And then I'm doing some research on lighthouses as well. And my latest YouTube interview, I need to put that up. So I've got to try and get all of this done today. And I don't know. Yesterday I didn't even eat. I was so busy all day. I actually didn't have time to eat, and I got reprimanded by my wife for that remotely because she's
So
at
she
work.
should.
Yeah, have you eaten yet? Have you eaten yet? No, no, I'm going to eat in a moment. I just didn't have time in the end. But I'm going to
Forget.
try and eat today if
I
I have
don't. It's
time.
living. If we're living on your own, I definitely forget to eat. There will definitely be days that I have no idea that when last did I eat? Oh, 2 days ago. But hey, let me let me eat. Anyway,
Yeah, I think
wow.
good salt, Celtic salt, and
Mm,
perhaps taking water in through fruit, structured water,
yes,
and direct sunlight. And you don't necessarily need to be eating as much as we're encouraged to. This 3 meal a day
I
nonsense.
agree. I
It's not
fully agree
true.
with that. You know, interesting you should mention that because there's this whole thing that we should have breakfast because breakfast gives you your energy and you know, I have the opposite. I don't eat breakfast. I have not
Yeah.
eaten breakfast for I don't know how long because the minute I eat breakfast, I'm slow, I'm sluggish,
Hmm.
I feel like I picked up 10 kilograms. Um, I think it's definitely like psychological for sure. But in the practice of yoga, and they say like when you go to gym, for example, eat and carbo load and blah blah blah. In the practice of yoga, you practice on an empty stomach.
Mm.
And on the odd occasion that I've maybe had something to eat before yoga or even drink, my experience is completely different
Yeah,
than
I can
when you
imagine.
actually do it on an empty stomach because your energy is actually flowing. And when it's not, I mean, you
Yeah,
nauseous, you tired. Ah, no, I agree with this not
yeah,
eating so much. I mean, I think to eat one meal a
yeah.
day is fine,
Yeah, it's fine,
my
and
opinion.
and also it's good to fast as well, so you can get rid of all of the toxins
Totally.
and all the what you're carrying that you shouldn't be, and the lining
Exactly.
of your intestine, get that out, and the sort of mucus and so on. Yeah, I think it's important to fast. So I'll sometimes do a couple of days where I don't eat anything. But unfortunately, I'm not great at fruits. I should eat a lot more. I have a banana every morning and half a pint of coconut milk. I have that every morning, and then I might eat in the evening. But water is better. You're better take water through fruit and veg. Like cucumber, for example, has got a high level of water because it's structured water, and that's how we're
Love
supposed to
cucumber, yeah.
hydrate.
And
Salt and
watermelon.
yeah, salt and fruit. That's going to keep us hydrated, and the fruit gives us structured water, which is how we're supposed to hydrate and drink water. We're not supposed
Yeah.
to drink it out of a bottle or a tap.
And out of a plastic Nestle bottle.
Yeah, yeah, they've bought up a
Who
lot of the
controls the
private.
water supply?
Yeah, they do here. Yeah, they bought a lot of it up. Yeah, Nestle. Yeah, and it gives them the opportunity to fluoride it, don't they? They can
Yeah,
fluorinate it too. Yeah, and of course the microplastics as well. It's all very clever.
absolutely. Guy, what a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to having you back in a couple of weeks' time. We will be exploring more of these very interesting topics. So, is there anything just in closing that you would like to? All your details are most certainly in the uh, description area. Here's your website
Yeah, the
going
website's where they
on.
can find me. Yeah, so if they want to read my
And
books or my blogs, that's the best place.
fantastic. Anything in closing you want to say to us?
Uh, no, not really. I think I've covered everything. I guess I would just reiterate that the only person that's going to get through this is ourselves. You know, we've got to
Exactly.
take full responsibility and stop waiting for someone to come along and rescue us. It's our time to shine.
Absolutely. Definitely is our time to shine. So shine on, you little shiners, you little sun sparks. Lovely. So appreciate you, Guy, and I so appreciate everybody in the chat. And if you didn't catch my previous interview with Guy, it'll be in the we'll do a playlist here. And so yeah, catch us there, and we will see you for more in the future. Take good care, everybody. God bless you all. Stay connected, stay in tune, and yeah, just stay cool and sassy, man. And that's life. Stay cool and sassy. Don't comply. Most definitely don't. Okay, guys, take it easy. God bless you.